credit on your first post at Indeed.com/credit. Terms and conditions apply. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. As you may know, the Pats likely are going to need a quarterback. We'll see what happens with Cam Newton. You just heard Mike Reese say maybe a return engagement for Jimmy Garoppolo. Yesterday, Romeo Crennel, the former Chiefs head coach, interim with the Texans, a guy that coached under Bill Belichick, joined us yesterday morning and essentially says, here's the blueprint for Bill.
Bill is a very good football coach. He's a good evaluator of talent. And, I think that he will look at his team and see where he needs to pump it up, at what positions he needs to pump up, and then try to address that this offseason, through free agency and through the draft. And I know there's an old adage in coaching is that good players make good coaches. And so I think we all understand that and realize that, and so we try to get the good players to make us look good.
Straight Talk Wireless, no contract, no compromise. We'll go to Boston in 3 minutes to get the thoughts of what's going on in the city from guys that cover the Pats all the time. Key, what do you think here if there's an opening to play quarterback for Bill Belichick in 2021?
They've got to find one. I mean, there's the usual cast of characters that's out there. You heard them in that bump talk about Matthew Stafford. Okay, does that satisfy Belichick's taste buds? Jimmy Garoppolo. Yeah, I had him. I moved him. Does that satisfy Bill Belichick's taste buds? So when you start to think about some of the quarterbacks that could become available, and it all depends on what Bill wants to do. Does Bill want to run it back and assemble some pieces, or does he want to completely tear it down and start fresh and draft a young quarterback somewhere in the early part of the first, second round and build a team for the future? It just all depends on what he wants to do. There's a lot of little pieces and holes that they have to address. There's my position. That's horrific for them. They don't have any receivers. I mean, the best receiver is a free agent, Jacoby Myers, who is doing as much as he can do. His ceiling is only so high, right? They got to address the tight end issue, shore up some of the offensive line, look at some pieces on defense. So he's got to put a team together that he feels good about. And the quarterback spot would be a good starting spot, but is some of those guys that's out there the right choice?
Yeah, I think that, if you can get a guy like Matthew Stafford, if you're able to pull that off, great. I think if not, then you go to the draft, obviously, with the 15th selection this year. Will a guy like Mac Jones be available? Key, I know you're not high on Mac Jones, but, from what we heard from Louis Riddick the other day, he has been extremely efficient in him throwing and the way he's played. So, and if you do get a guy in the draft that you decide to build more long-term with, then do you go out and get a guy like a Ryan Fitzpatrick, right? We saw how great Ryan Fitzpatrick was in Miami with the likes of Tua from a leadership perspective, from a tutelage perspective, a mentorship perspective, right? Put your arms around a young guy, but still a guy that's extremely serviceable and played at a high level and can understand schemes and systems due to all the different teams that he's played for.
Matt, here's what I would say about the quarterback spot for Bill Belichick. When you look in his coaching tenure, where has Coach valued that? The highest guy, I believe, was Jimmy Garoppolo that he's drafted in his coaching tenure, not just at New England, but in Cleveland as part of assistant coaching jobs with the Giants as well as the Jets. Like, where has he drafted or been a part of teams that have drafted quarterbacks 15th in the draft or 12th in the draft or late in the first round? I mean, you gotta understand his philosophy and his thought process. Tom Brady, for all intents and purposes, kind of fell in coach's lap, and then he developed him to become one of the greatest quarterbacks ever. But it wasn't like he drafted him in the second round. He passed on him 4 or 5 times before he made a decision that this was going to be a guy that we think we could work with. Even Matt Castle. They found Matt Castle, who hadn't took a snap basically at USC, dusted him off because he saw the talent and said, this guy can make an NFL club. So when you start to think about the way that he builds teams and how he builds rosters, is not going to get a quarterback in the first round because somebody says that's what they need to do.
Couple things on Fitzpatrick. I love your Fitzpatrick. And then I think he has the clean sweep of the AFC.
Exactly. He's played for everybody. He's been for 2 years, right? Everybody. Buffalo, Miami, the Jets.
Oh, yeah. He's Jets, Miami, Buffalo.
Right?
That ain't happening, though, in New England.
Here's the other
I get
question.
what Jay is saying, but it ain't happening.
No, I like the idea, though. Here's another thing we can ask our expert in Boston, who will be on in a minute. You guys mentioned Matthew Stafford. Again, Stafford is going to be 33 years old next week. He's been in the league a dozen years. He's 0-3 in the playoffs, but I think when you play for the Lions, that's a mitigating factor. However, this could be interesting, and you tell me what you guys think, and we'll ask Dale Arnold about it from WEEI, the powerhouse station in Boston, in a minute. There's lots of reports that Matt Patricia, the old Lions coach, is going to go back to New England to be a consultant for Bill Belichick. I'm just asking you, I see the look on your face. Is there any way that could affect Matthew Stafford's future?
Man,
in New England?
You think Matthew Stafford want to mess around with that dude? Just because he's going back to Boston doesn't mean, or New England doesn't mean that Matt Stafford wants to go to a team that's rebuilding. Matthew Stafford is at the tail end to a degree of his NFL career. He's trying to win. In going to New England for him, do you really have a real legitimate shot at winning? I'm sure there's going to be other suitors that are out there for Matthew Stafford. Plus, do Bill Belichick want to take an injury-prone quarterback? Matthew Stafford has missed a ton of time in the National Football League.
Absolutely.
He's always hurt. Always hurt.
He's always hurt because he plays for the Detroit Lions.
Well, I mean, that may be true, though, Jay, but we miss on that when we having these conversations. Let's put the facts out on the table. He has been a amazing statistical quarterback, but it's not like you saying you're getting a guy who's a perennial playoff contender year in and year out.
I just feel as if he's never had a true running option. I mean, and his O-line has always been subpar.
Yeah, that's facts. Real quick before we go to Boston, this is how long it's been. The Lions haven't won a playoff game since 1991. Anybody want to take a guess? Dale Arnold, you can take a guess if you want. He joins us from Dale and Keefe, WEEI 93.7. Last Lions quarterback to win a playoff game. Anybody want to weigh in? 1991. Anybody?
Kramer.
Yes, Eric Kramer. Great call, Key. Sorry, Dale, he beat you to the punch. All right, Dale, I want to ask you. Key's poo-pooing it. Patricia back.
I'm not poo-pooing it.
Matthew Stafford to the Pats with the Patricia factor. You go.
I can't believe. Well, first of all, he doesn't have a choice, right? Does he have a no trade? Can he dictate where he goes and where he doesn't go?
I think they have a communication going on with the Detroit Lions, which I love. I love the fact that Detroit, Dale, I said this, will work with him to find the proper destination, which you don't typically see teams willing to work with guys. They hold on to them until they just rot. But in this situation, they're willing to work with them.
I always wonder what that means. I mean, let's be honest. Key, as long as you played in the NFL, do you trust when management tells you they're willing to work with you?
I in this situation, I do, because his agent, as well as himself and Coach Campbell, they all kind of saying, we want to, let's see what we can get. We know that this isn't, because we're going to rebuild, and why let him sit there for the next 3 years, whatever, and you're rebuilding? Why do that to him? He deserves the opportunity to find a destination that he desires.
Well, if that exists, if that kind of relationship exists, and if that kind of proper treatment of an athlete exists, then no, they won't trade him to New England, and I don't think he wants to come here. I heard what you were saying about the rebuild, and I don't know if it'll be quite as long as that. I've got probably more faith in Bill Belichick and $60 million in salary cap money to play with, to turn this thing around. But everything I've read indicates that the perfect place for him and the perfect place for the team would be Indianapolis, where they may be a Matt Stafford away from being a contender in their conference.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That the Jim Irsay, the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, said that they're going to look at everything, but a veteran quarterback, which fits the description, Dale, of a Matthew Stafford, would be perfect for a team that was built for Andrew Luck to make a run. Then the keys were handed to Phillip Rivers, and we saw how far they went with an aging Phillip Rivers, and now Matthew Stafford comes aboard. If they could keep him healthy, that's a perfect landing spot.
I guess the question is, if you're Frank Reich and you're a quarterback away, would you want that quarterback to be Matthew Stafford or Carson Wentz? Because that's the other name that you've heard connected to the Colts, Reich and Wentz, and what could you do with him? Quarterbacks a hell of a lot better than I do. Which one do you think would do a better job for them?